What began as a simple family outing, a cheerful lunch to celebrate Jack's 18th birthday, unfolded into something far more complex. As always, my husband Will was consumed by work, lost in spreadsheets and deadlines, while I stayed behind, to wash dishes and bake pies, clinging to hopes of a day filled with joy and warmth. I often found myself wondering when the seemingly smooth surface of our life began to fracture, like old wood silently splitting at the seams. To the outside world, we appeared picture perfect. A beautiful home, well-behaved children, polished smiles. Neighbors admired us. But I alone knew the truth, the quiet decay that had crept into our sanctuary. Will, always restless, drifted in and out like a ghost tethered to his career. I, meanwhile, had grown quietly, painfully lonely. That day, the sun blazed down at the beach, warming my skin, but making the hollowness inside me feel more profound. Jack and I were laughing, tossing a ball, sharing easy memories. In an ordinary moment, he reached behind to apply sunscreen to my back. The touch was gentle, almost absent-minded. At the time, it felt innocent. But as the day wore on, the memory of it unsettled me. Something had shifted. My mind, already crowded with faded dreams, circled a realization I hadn't dared admit. Jack was the only one who still saw me. His small, unthinking kindnesses, his laughter, his questions, the way he listened, sparked something deep in me, something long dormant. Warmth, attention, something Will had taken away, or perhaps had simply stopped giving. In that moment, I understood. Jack was unknowingly filling the hollow my husband had left behind, and that truth, once it surfaced, refused to be ignored. I didn't know what it meant for us, or even for me. All I knew was that the carefully arranged birthday picnic was beginning to unravel. As we sat on the beach, surrounded by laughter and waves and children's voices, the world around me faded to a blur. Inside, I was drifting farther away. A wave of sorrow overtook the joy. The silence between us, me and Will, grew louder in my ears. It was suffocating. I no longer felt the warmth I'd once longed for. When Will returned home that night, he didn't ask how my day had been. He didn't greet me, didn't even glance in Jack's direction. His absence was deafening, even when he was in the same room. At the kitchen table, I sat across from a man who no longer saw me, who hadn't really seen me in years. I had become background noise in his life. Familiar, routine, easy to overlook. Later, alone in his study, I stood before his desk, now cluttered and cold, and let memories I had buried rise to the surface. Regret twisted in my chest. How had I allowed this to happen? Where had the woman gone who once took pride in her home, in her marriage? I felt like a faded version of who I used to be, hollow and worn thin. I needed to be seen, to feel necessary, important. That night, as I spoke, and Jack listened with genuine interest, something in me stirred. His wide, attentive eyes, so open, so alive, reminded me of trust and hope I'd long forgotten. Then, it happened again. A brief, subtle touch on my back, a glance that held something deeper than comfort. For a second, I was paralyzed. The room blurred. The moment was small, yet monumental. A dam had broken. Everything I'd buried, loneliness, longing, a need to feel connected, rushed to the surface. A storm of emotion gripped me. I felt exposed, not just to Jack, but to myself, like I had finally betrayed the quiet denial that had been keeping me afloat. When I came back to myself, I was back on the beach. I could hear the distant laughter again, see the families around us. But something inside me had changed. I realized I had built a prison out of appearances, and now I needed the courage to break free. My emotions were unraveling, dragging me in different directions. It wasn't love, not quite. But the bond between us had become too intense to ignore. Jack looked at me with confusion, his earlier playfulness gone. In his eyes, I saw the same question I was asking myself. What was this? Where could it lead? I knew we stood at the edge of something unspoken but undeniable. I was on the verge of a truth that would change me forever. How could I allow myself to feel this way for someone who wasn't mine? We were both lost in separate silences, bonded by loneliness, separated by impossibility. A fragile wall still stood between us. But it wouldn't hold forever. It wasn't love. It was time slipping through my fingers, loss accumulating in small, sharp moments. I stood on a wide, lonely beach, torn between nostalgia and guilt. Will represented all the parts of myself I had lost in the shadows. Jack was the light, but he could never truly be mine. Summer had once meant peace. Now its brightness only illuminated what I had been trying not to see. The sea shimmered through the window, beckoning, while Will's absence continued to hollow out my heart. He always chose work over family. Every time he did, it pierced me anew. I pushed the thought away and got into the car with Jack, the only one who still wanted to share these moments with me. As we drove toward the beach, I stole glances at him. Headphones on, eyes distant, he looked older somehow, more detached. I felt a surge of fear. One blink, and he'd be gone. It terrified me, but it also strangely liberated me. As I held onto the memory of him as a little boy, his hand in mine, his laughter echoing through the house, I tried to steady my thoughts. When we arrived, Jack helped unload the bags, and his quiet efficiency comforted me. As he set up the umbrella, I saw flickers of the child he used to be. I wanted to ask him what he was feeling, what he was thinking, but I said nothing. I lay down, letting the sun pour over me like an old familiar blanket. My thoughts wandered to the bottle of suntan oil beside me as I fought to quiet the ache inside. I saw Jack hesitate when I asked him for help. It was like he wanted to get away from the situation. I could feel my chest getting tighter when he finally agreed. It caught me off guard when he touched me with hands that were no longer those of a kid. They were soft and careful. I had no idea why this simple moment hit me so hard and made my body shake in a way I hadn't felt. Before Jack slowly put on the oil his hands, moving as if he were thinking about what to do, he touched me in a steady beat and I closed my eyes. I felt something I hadn't felt in what seemed like a long time. The feel of his hands made me think of the first time I held him as a helpless baby. That memory was very different from the feeling that was going through me at the moment. But his touch soon became more sure of itself and moved lower. It felt like a storm had come out of nowhere and caught me off guard. I tried to say something to tell him to stop, but nothing came out. Although I waist-stringed to cool down in the silence, I told myself that it was just a kind act. Still, it seemed like reality around me changed every second. He kept his hands close to the edge of the towel for a while, and I could tell he wasn't sure what to do. I could have stopped him at any time, but he told him in a whisper that everything was okay. Those words hung in the air like a judgment that could not be changed. At that time, there was more silence between us. I felt like I was sinking deeper into myself, and his touch was the only thing that was left. As his fingers moved down, I could no longer fight him. My inner objections went away, leaving me in a tizzy of feelings. I couldn't even explain to myself. It was too much for my feelings, and I felt both lonely and excited at the same time. Even though I didn't understand what was going on, my joy grew. Maybe it was because I had been holding on to a longing for so long. when I was on the beach and my life was broken and empty. Jack became a rare light I could no longer ignore. There was a rush of feelings building up inside me that I couldn't ignore. He wasn't just someone I cared about in a dark world. He was the only thing that could make me feel alive. When we looked at each other, I saw that every spark in his eyes was the same as mine. It seemed like fate had given me this chance, which I couldn't pass up. By letting go of the past and the future, I was able to give in to the warmth of Themament. I didn't know what to say, so I let out a whisper. "You can goon." Those words seemed to speak for themselves. Born from the fire of Themament, he went on. With each deliberate movement of his hands, I felt more than just physical sensations. I closed my eyes and let his touch create a cloud of magic around me. It was a world I didn't want to leave. It felt like he was getting to the core of who I am, a sense of wonder and truthfulness. It was clear to both of us that this was not a normal moment. It was a new way to connect a ringing of feelings that couldn't be named. At that very moment, I realized that his hands were doing more than just touching me. They were currents of an unnameable feeling that mixed happiness, lightness, and madness. I could feel a strong desire tearing me apart from the inside. My lips were pressed together tightly. The desire became clear when my thoughts stopped, and there was only the sound of our breathing together to break the silence. I opened my eyes and looked up at him. For a split second, everything else seemed unimportant. We were on this endless beach by ourselves, away from everything else. The rules and the world didn't matter. In this case, it was only armament, but I felt like there was a whole world of possibilities inside of it. Every second was filled with those rare feelings that are often hidden by the routine of daily life. I wanted to stop time, so the wall between us wouldn't move, and our souls and hearts would always be one. Our secret haven was this beach picnic. Even the quiet had meaning, and we didn't need to say anything. My worries and fears went away for a while, and in their place was a weak link that held us together. We went through an endless sea of emotions like two ships seeking shelter from a storm. This shows that feelings can sometimes go beyond what words can describe. As we shared a quiet, close reality, we stopped being just mother and son. Instead, we were like flowers that were trying to reach the light without realizing that it could get too bright and day. I didn't notice how quickly time was passing as the sun went down and threw long shadows over the beach. Taking deep breaths of the fresh sea air, I fell into a peaceful silence. It felt like a repair, a break from the dull, worn-out life that had taken its place. But now it was time to go back, home. And with that came a familiar fear that crept up on me like a cold that wouldn't go away. As Jack and I got into the car, I felt like everything was going to happen anyway. As we drove a few blocks, I got lost in my thoughts and tried to separate myself from the unbearable pain that seemed to be eating away at my soul. Each turn of the wheels made the fragile peace I had built up around myself shrink as if something scary was waiting for us at home. Once I got there, I was back in my small world, surrounded by the apathy that Will had created by being absent all the time. He talked out loud, while working as if no one else was in the house. He seemed to be stuck in his own little world. I could hear his steps in the kitchen as he made dinner, but it was clear that he was thinking about something else. Every time he looked away from me, it made it harder to hold back the anger that was building up inside me. "Will, are you hungry again?" So I could keep things somewhat normal, I asked. His smile was fake and short. There was a small nod, and he kept looking through the cabinets for something to do in the evening. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Jack High's eyes. His hands and his full attention of it made the lines between what used to feel normal less clear. I tried to get rid of those thoughts, but they kept coming back over and over. I knew I had to stop and force myself to be quiet, but a darker part of me didn't want to. It missed the connection and care I used to get from Will. As the days went by, Jack became quiet. His attitude, which he didn't say, said more than anything he could have, as I cooked or sat in the living room. His eyes became sharp and never left my side. Couldn't take his eyes off of me one night as I watched TV. I didn't reject it. Instead, I let it happen, which led to an excellent bond between us. Something that neither of us could put into words, but deeply felt. There was a lot of heat in the house on the weekend. We left again, leaving Jack and me alone. I don't know where the desire to go back to the beach. Our beach came from, but it was strong. I might have been trying to get away from the stuffy house, or I might have been holding out hope that the fresh air would help me clear my mind. It was clear that we were tense during the drive. Jack sat there with his headphones on and looked out the window. I felt something tighten inside, causing me to face what was going on between us. It was peaceful and calm in the morning. As I worked on breakfast in the kitchen, the smell of freshly made coffee and warm toasted bread mixed together, I couldn't help but smile as it thought about how many times Will had quickly looked at me before running out the door. The regular beat of our lives could be seen in how our mornings had become like a clock. Today, though, he walked up to me and kissed my face. For a brief moment, I felt his presence like the soft warmth of early spring sunlight. But before long, he was leaving and going back to his dull work-centered world. I heard his steps on the stairs, and then the door slam, leaving me alone in the sunny, quiet house. Like always, Jack walked into the kitchen almost inaudibly. Like a ghost in the early morning light, it was fascinating how still he was. As she stood by the window and looked outside, I looked at him and saw that his eyes were fixed on me just like they were on the beach when he seemed to have no thoughts about anything else. It was clear to both of us that this relationship had grown into more than just a mother-son tie. It was very hot, and I could feel his breath behind me. It was a gentle reminder of how love and warmth could swallow everything. I was stunned by how intense the moment was, and I tried to stop him with a quiet word. But before I could say anything else, he moved closer, and I felt both scared and excited. I need to leave started, but he stopped me. When his lips touched mine, it made me feel a lot of different feelings. As soon as I kissed him, back everything fell apart. I knew it was wrong. I was so caught up in my feelings of love and anxiety that I forgot about what was right or wrong. I knew it could destroy everything I felt. Live again, after each kiss, which was something I hadn't felt. In a long time, I broke all the rules and went into the unknown in those brief moments. The day went on, but I felt like I was in a storm, Jack, and I went past a line that was never meant to be crossed. I now knew that this wasn't a mistake, that would go away soon, but a heavy load that would get heavier over time. I knew I was in the edge of my own world, and couldn't get away from the shame that was pressing down on me. I couldn't get away from his look, or his small signs of love, which made me feel both longing and desire. Even so, it still felt like we were precariously close to falling into chasm. That's when I realized something very important had changed about me. We were a part of something that was against the rules, but it felt important when his hands touched me. The feeling broke down the barriers that were holding me back and let feelings that I'd been denying come out. I wondered if I had done something wrong, because I